And so we just wanted to look at a couple of things within it.
First of all, we wanted to look at why this topic is important. And one of the first things we found is that times are tough. There's rough economic times going on, which in turn makes people more depressed altogether. People are making less money and things like that, so they don't get as many services as they would have liked. There are also high levels of job stress, and one study we found is that soon job stress will be the #1 reason for workers' compensation. And finally, we found that there is a low level of job satisfaction. And one survey we found stated that only 45% of Americans who are employed are satisfied with their jobs, which is a record low. And the few reasons for this job satisfaction include fewer workers are considering their jobs to be interesting, the incomes of workers have not kept up with inflation, and the soaring cost of health insurance has eaten into workers' take-home pay. And one example we found of this is Michael Scott from The Office not being very satisfied with his job.
Everything's wrong! The stress of my modern office has caused me to go into a depression.
Depression? Isn't that just a fancy word for feeling bummed out?
Dwight, you ignorant slut! Everything's wrong.
Okay, so as that clip you saw that stress is getting really high in the workplace and people, you need a way to deal with all of this. So some of the ways that we found is that there's a big role for humor in the workplace to be played. It helps manage stress for people, it sparks creativity, builds relationship and culture, helps you communicate more effectively, and it helps you stand out from the herd. And so we'll elaborate on each one of these topics. So managing stress. We saw that it helps reduce tension and boredom. So people under stress tend to repeat normalized behaviors and patterns and ignore new innovative approaches, especially if they're dealing with complex tasks. So a healthy sense of humor is always one of the most effective to bust stress going on in the workplace. It helps people distance themselves from workplace tensions, maintain a balanced perspective, and overcome obstacles. And if we always think that, don't take yourself too seriously, have that kind of mindset going into it, and will help shut off a lot of that tension going on, and a lot of stress in the workplace. So stress, serving to relieve stress, humor impacts the way people act, think, and helps elevate the effective motivation state. It interjects humor of stressful situation, presents a pleasant experience that can elicit positive change in mood and reduce anxiety. Another thing that it helps to do is to spark creativity. It helps people make connections. It highlights discrepancies or logics going on, promotes concentration, and it gives a new perspective or freedom from thought. So a lot of times in the workplace, when people are making a joke during a meeting, it helps them see that they are making connections and that they are understanding what's going on, and other people can see that logic behind it. Some humorous exchanges enable a shift in perspective so that people can stand back and take a fresh look at problems. Essentially, humor is giving individuals the freedom of thought and permission to move past the norms. Ultimately, this works to open the lines of communication. So opening the lines of communication, it enhances the learning in the workplace and understanding. Humor is a communication that creates an open atmosphere and awakens by positive emotions and enhances listening, understanding, and acceptance of the message. We also thought that creating humorous environment allows people to have an easier psychological contract, so you can go to your manager more easily when you have that clear relationship with them. So with relationships, we also found that humor helps build trust and eases the process of change. So other types of humor can be used in ways that could be explained as often offensive or inappropriate to employees outside of organizations that may be as whereby a team builds a barrier to the rest of the community. This barrier, however, can be a team or work group to coalesce around a unifying values or occurrence of culture. Humor can be means whereby values and accessible rather than mystify or removed. So that's just one of the ways that humor can be used to help build relationships. It also helps people stand out from the herd. We saw that it increases the overall likability and gives people higher performance reviews. So when subordinates are able to make jokes with their superiors, it helps give likability, makes people feel more comfortable around one another. Sharing humor with one supervisor has found to be a behavior associated with subordinates rated higher by their superiors. It is a characteristic often found by high-performing teams, which moderates tension and stress. So some of the pitfalls of humor can be listed here.
So one thing that is important to note is that while humor is an effective tool in managing stress and creating open environments and fostering communication, building culture, those types of things, there are also pitfalls to humor in the workplace that employees and employers alike have to be conscious of. So one of the first things we want to talk about is that there's inclusive humor and there's exclusive humor. And inclusive humor brings everyone together, and it's a joke that everyone can laugh about. However, exclusive humor is inside humor, or humor that you had to be there to experience. And this type of humor can make people feel like they're part of the group and increase group cohesiveness, but it can also make people feel excluded. So organizations, employees, employers need to be careful that they use humor constructively as to not shut other people out. Another important concept is that humor can be offensive, and that there is a fine line to be drawn between humor and harassment. You need to make sure that your humor does not turn into harassment, because then you could be facing lawsuits and those types of things, which are not good for any organization. And finally, humor can distance someone from a task. We did talk about how humor can, increase productivity in certain ways, but if organizations only focus on humor alone, then they're not going to get their work done. So one thing that's important is that where it is disallowed or used negatively, where humor is disallowed or used negatively, communication can be impeded, relationships between peers or between managers and staff can be undermined, human resource can experience damaging stress levels, perspectives can be clouded, and concentration and motivation can be eroded. Thus, the key is to practice safe humor, and that is humor that builds rather than divides relationships, and humor that laughs with people rather than at them. And so now we're going to show an example where humor in the workplace, kind of took a bad turn and turned into harassment and wasn't funny to all.